We've all met someone who made us feel special, who said the right words, showed up when they needed to, and disappeared when we needed them most. At first, it feels like connection. But over time, a pattern begins to form, a pattern that drains, confuses, and ultimately leaves us questioning our worth. That pattern, it's the behavior of someone who is only there to use you. You see, manipulators aren't always cruel. Sometimes they're charming. They'll mirror your values, pretend to care, and even offer temporary support, only to later demand more from you when you're most vulnerable. The hardest part is not identifying them at first, because they don't always come with red flags. Sometimes they come with smiles and compliments. But if we're honest with ourselves, deep down, we feel the imbalance. We sense the weight of being needed, but never nurtured. We know something's wrong when our presence is convenient only when they need something. Attention, money, comfort, validation. Let's break it down. Here's how a person who just wants to use you really acts. Because once you know these signs, you stop asking what you did wrong and start protecting your peace. A user's relationship with you is transactional. They might borrow your time, money, energy, or emotional support, but when you need even a fraction of that in return, they're suddenly busy, absent, or indifferent. You'll notice you're the one who checks in, follows up, and keeps things together. Giving is natural in healthy relationships, but when it becomes one-sided, that's not connection, it's consumption. When everything's fine, they're around. But the moment life tests you, when you're down, broken, or asking for help, they vanish like smoke. Their support has conditions. They'll show up only when it's easy or beneficial. If your struggles don't serve them, they will disconnect emotionally or physically. Their loyalty is not to you, it's to their own convenience. The moment you say a no, you'll see their true face. Users hate boundaries because boundaries threaten control. As long as you're agreeable and available, they stay sweet. But set a limit. Say you can't help this time or ask for space, and they'll guilt trip, blame, or even turn cold. If someone only values you when you're sacrificing for them, they never valued you, just what you gave them. They use hot and cold behavior to keep control. One moment they're overly kind, the next distant or dismissive. This emotional inconsistency keeps you guessing, trying to win back their attention or approval. They want you to chase. Why? Because chasing makes you forget to question. And when you're confused, you're easier to use. Users can't stand when the focus shifts away from them. Try to prioritize your goals, your healing, or even your rest, and suddenly you're a selfish, a difficult, or a cold. This guilt tripping is strategic. It's designed to pull you back into the role of giver, helper, and fixer. But your job is not to drain yourself to keep someone else comfortable. Pay attention to how you feel after spending time with someone. Do you feel energized, seen, understood? Or do you feel drained, anxious, and empty? People who use you leave behind emotional fatigue. It's like you've given too much and received nothing that truly fills you. Your spirit knows when it's being taken advantage of, even if your heart wants to give them one more chance. One of the most telling signs of someone who just wants to use you is the subtle yet consistent pattern of taking without giving. At first, it might not be obvious. They might ask for small favors, a ride here, a little money there, your time, your emotional support. You brush it off because that's what friends, partners, or colleagues do for one another, right? You think you're being kind, loyal, helpful. And yes, giving is part of any healthy relationship. But not when giving becomes your full-time role and theirs is to simply receive. You start to notice that every conversation somehow ends up being about them. Every time you call to talk, they dominate the discussion with their issues, their struggles, their needs. You listen, you offer advice, you show up. But when the roles reverse, when you need to talk, to cry, to lean, they're busy. They respond with short texts, generic replies, or emotional absence. The enthusiasm they had when they needed something, it disappears. This pattern gets even clearer when the things they take aren't just physical or material, but emotional. They drain your energy by constantly expecting you to lift them up. They rely on you to boost their confidence, motivate them when they're down, or reassure them when they feel insecure. And you keep doing it because you care. But over time, it starts to feel like a job. And worse, it feels unappreciated. They might frame their constant taking as normal. You're always so strong, or you're the only one I trust, or so good at helping. And while those may sound like compliments, they're actually veiled expectations. It's their way of grooming you into a permanent caregiver role. They make it your duty to be their emotional safety net. But when you falter, they make you feel guilty. You're expected to pour endlessly from a cup they never help refill. Even in more transactional terms, money, favors, time. It's always you reaching into your resources while they come up empty-handed when it's your turn. They may borrow money and never return it. They may rely on your connections, your home, your car, your kindness. But if you dare ask them to reciprocate, suddenly you're too demanding or overreacting. They keep taking because they know you'll keep giving. Not because they respect you, but because they rely on your inability to say no. They exploit your empathy, your loyalty, your desire to keep the peace. They don't contribute equally to your well-being, and they rarely even acknowledge the imbalance. Because acknowledgement would require change, and change would mean losing their access to everything you provide. And slowly, that imbalance wears you down. You begin to feel emotionally bankrupt, stretched thin, confused about whether you're helping or being used. You might even start to wonder if you're asking for too much, when all you're truly asking for is mutual respect, effort, and care. One of the most painful signs that someone is only using you is their sudden disappearance the moment you need support. When life is going well, when you're laughing, giving, celebrating, they're right there beside you. They bask in your energy, enjoy your efforts, and take from your kindness as if it's endless. But the true test of someone's intentions is not how they treat you when things are easy. It's how they show up when things get hard. And the user, they vanish. At first, their absence might look like bad timing. Maybe they forgot to call back. Maybe they were busy with work. But patterns speak louder than excuses. If every time you're struggling, whether it's emotionally, financially, or mentally, they become unavailable, unresponsive, or completely indifferent, that's not a coincidence. That's a calculated behavior. They were never truly invested in you. They were invested in the benefits of being around you. You'll notice that tone change the moment you're no longer in a position to give. If you're sick, grieving, or burned out, suddenly that check-ins stop. They don't ask how you're doing. They don't offer help, and they don't stay by your side. Their presence was conditional all along. They showed up when they had something to gain. The moment it became about you and your needs, they began to fade into silence. This kind of emotional abandonment hits deeper because it forces you to confront a difficult reality. You were useful, not cherished. You were a provider of some kind, be it love, validation, resources, or attention. But the second that flow stopped, so did their interest. You realize that your pain was never part of the relationship contract, only your generosity was. What's more manipulative is how they might return after your crisis is over, acting like nothing happened. They'll resurface when you're better, when you're smiling again, when you've picked yourself back up, and often they'll say things like, "I didn't know how to help," or "I figured you needed space." But in reality, they didn't want the discomfort of showing up for you unless it made them feel good about themselves. Their loyalty was performative, not real. True connection is tested in adversity. If someone can't be there when you're breaking, then they never deserved you at your best. But users only see relationships through the lens of benefit. If your struggle costs them time, effort, or emotional labor, they opt out. They believe loyalty is optional, but taking is guaranteed. You'll start to feel the weight of their absence, not just in their physical presence, but in their emotional neglect. You'll cry and they won't notice. You'll hint at needing support and they'll change the subject. You'll ask directly for help and they'll offer excuses. It becomes clear that your pain is an inconvenience they don't want to deal with. And that clarity, though painful, is what finally reveals their true nature. When someone disappears in your time of need, it's not just about physical absence, it's about emotional betrayal. This kind of silence echoes. So it's not just that they didn't show up, it's why they didn't show up that hurts the most, because deep down you expected them to be there. You believed that the time, energy, love, and loyalty you invested in them meant something, that it would be returned when you were the one in need. But when life knocked you down, they didn't offer a hand. They walked away. They'll justify it in subtle ways. I didn't want to bother you. You seemed distant. I didn't know what to say. These excuses are carefully crafted to shift the blame onto you, as if your pain made you unreachable or your vulnerability made them feel uncomfortable. But in reality, their disappearing act is not a sign of confusion or fear. It's a reflection of their true priority themselves. They don't want to invest when there's nothing to gain. Showing up during hard times means sacrificing energy, listening without judgment, and offering something they can't fake, empathy. And empathy doesn't benefit them directly. There's no praise in being quiet support. There's no attention to steal when the spotlight is on your suffering. So they go missing. And the most dangerous part, they make you question your right to expect more. They subtly convince you that maybe you are too much when you're hurting. Maybe your sadness is a burden. Maybe you're asking for more than you deserve. So instead of blaming them for leaving, you start blaming yourself for needing. That's how users win. They train you to accept less while they continue to take more. You might reach out in your lowest moments expecting a familiar voice, a caring word. And all you get is coldness, indifference, or even worse, silence. They may ghost you entirely or give you half-hearted responses that make you feel even lonelier than if they said nothing at all. You realize you're emotionally naked in front of someone who doesn't care if you're bleeding. And the wound deepens, not just from life's hardship, but from the absence of someone you thought you could count on. They reappear when you've done the hard work of healing yourself. Once you're whole again, smiling, functioning, and shining, they'll slide back in like nothing happened. I missed you. How have you been? It's never about what you went through. It's about whether you're back to being useful again. This type of behavior trains you to suffer in silence. You stop asking for help. You stop reaching out. You start believing that no one will stay when things get dark. But this isn't true of everyone, only of those who were never really with you to begin with. Their pattern reveals everything. They didn't just miss a moment. They abandoned the version of you that was vulnerable, raw, and real. They wanted the cheerful, generous, problem-solving version of you, not the broken, healing, human one. And that speaks volumes about the kind of connection they offered. It was never love, never loyalty. It was opportunism disguised as care. When someone disappears when you're hurting, they don't deserve to reappear when you're strong, because someone who truly values you will lean in when the world leans out. They will stay, not because it's easy, but because you matter. A user doesn't have the strength to sit with your pain. They're only strong enough to stand beside your success. One of the clearest signs someone is using you is how they react when you start setting boundaries. As long as you're available, agreeable, and constantly giving, everything seems fine. But the moment you try to pull back, even slightly, you begin to see a side of them that was always hiding beneath the surface. That's because people who are only there to take from you do not respect your limits. They resent them. At first, they might push back gently. If you say you're too tired to help or can't talk at the moment, they may play it off with sarcasm. Oh, too busy for me now? Or since when do you need space? It sounds like a joke, but it's a warning. They are letting you know they don't appreciate your attempt to reclaim your time or energy. Because in their mind, your time and energy belong to them. Boundaries threaten the dynamic that benefits them. When you start saying no, whether it's declining a favor, not answering every call, or refusing to be their emotional dumping ground, they perceive it as betrayal. Why? Because they were never building a mutual relationship with you. They were building a dependency, a system in which they take and you give. Your boundaries disrupt that system, they disrupt their access. They may respond with guilt tripping. You've changed. You're not like you used to be. I guess I can't count on you anymore. These phrases aren't innocent. They're designed to make you second-guess your decision to protect yourself. They want you to feel bad for doing what's right for you. They want you to believe that setting limits is selfish when in truth, it's the healthiest thing you can do. And if guilt doesn't work, they may escalate. They might become passive-aggressive, cold, distant, or even angry. They might accuse you of being ungrateful or say you're abandoning them. But the truth is, they never respected you as a whole person, only as a resource. Your honor reminds them that they don't own you, and people who use others hate losing control. Sometimes they'll even pretend to honor your boundaries at first, but only long enough to break them later. They'll say, "Of course, I understand," and then a day later, ask for the very thing you just said you can't give. It's a manipulation tactic, a way to test if your boundaries are solid or if they can wear you down with pressure, charm, or pity. Healthy people respect when you need space, when you're not available, or when you ask for change. They don't take it personally because they recognize that boundaries aren't walls, they're bridges built on mutual understanding. But someone who's using you doesn't see it that way. They see your boundaries as obstacles between them and what they want from you. Over time, this becomes exhausting. You find yourself explaining and justifying every boundary, trying to avoid conflict or guilt. You start compromising your own well-being just to keep the peace. You say yes when you mean no. You show up when you're empty. You give more than you can afford, emotionally or mentally. And each time you do, you lose a piece of yourself. They condition you to believe that love or friendship means constant availability. That if you really care, you'll always say yes. But that's not love. That's emotional servitude. And the moment you start to say, "This doesn't work for me," they make you feel like the villain, but you're not. You're someone learning to protect your energy from those who only value you when you're easy to use. Their discomfort with your boundaries reveals the truth. They were never interested in a relationship based on equality. They only wanted access. And the moment you put a lock on the door, they try to pick it, break it, or walk away. Not because you hurt them, but because they can no longer take from you freely. A person who only wants to use you rarely reveals their intentions directly. Instead of showing their selfishness openly, they hide behind manipulation, inconsistency, and emotional gain. One of the most toxic tactics they rely on is keeping you in a constant state of confusion, never quite sure where you stand, never fully certain how they feel, and always slightly off balance. This is deliberate because when you're uncertain, you're easier to control. They'll give you just enough attention to keep you hopeful, but not enough to feel secure. One day they'll act warm, present, affectionate, even overly kind or flattering. They'll compliment you, text you first, ask how you're doing, maybe even do something thoughtful. But soon after, without any explanation, they'll go cold. Suddenly, the warmth vanishes. They ignore your messages, respond with distance, or treat you as if you're a burden. You're left wondering, did I do something wrong? Did I upset them? Were they ever genuine at all? This emotional roller coaster isn't accidental. It's designed to make you doubt yourself. You start overthinking everything, your words, your actions, even your tone. You begin working harder to embark on their good side, thinking if you can just do everything right, they'll treat you the way they did before. But that a good version of them was just bait. It wasn't a baseline. It was a tool. When someone truly values you, their behavior is steady, reliable, and sincere. But someone who is using you needs instability because in that instability, you become emotionally dependent. When they're hot and then cold, kind and then cruel, near and then distant, your brain gets caught in a loop, always chasing clarity, always seeking closure. You live in anticipation of the next high, addicted to the rare moments they treat you well, even if they come after long stretches of silence, criticism, or indifference. This kind of inconsistency rewires the way you think. Instead of focusing on your own needs, you focus entirely on them. You become hyper-aware of their moods, trying to avoid setting them off. You silence your own feelings to avoid conflict. You stop setting boundaries because you're afraid it might push them away. In the process, you lose your emotional balance, your voice, and your confidence, all while they maintain the upper hand. The more confused you are, the more power they hold. They never give you a clear answer about where the relationship is going, how they truly feel, or what they want. They avoid direct conversations, deflect responsibility, or even turn things around on you. If you try to express your confusion or hurt, they might say things like, "You're too sensitive," "You always overthink," or "I never said that," gaslighting you into believing your reactions are the problem. And it works. Over time, you start to distrust your own judgment. You second-guess your instincts. You doubt your right to feel hurt. That's what they want. To keep you so emotionally unsteady that you don't notice how little they're actually giving you. You become so focused on trying to fix things, trying to win their attention back, that you ignore the damage being done to you in the process. This confusion is not just a side effect of a toxic relationship. It is the tactic. Clarity leads to strength, but confusion creates dependency. They don't want you to feel secure because a secure person sees through manipulation. They want you emotionally exhausted, questioning yourself, and grateful for any scrap of attention they choose to offer. People who genuinely care about you bring peace. They bring certainty. But someone who uses you thrives on emotional chaos. They don't want partnership, they want control. And the easiest way to gain control is to make sure you're always just uncertain enough to keep coming back, hoping for consistency that they never intended to give. One of the most subtle and damaging behaviors of someone who is using you is how they respond when you begin to prioritize yourself. As long as your attention is on them, supporting them, helping them, solving their problems, they're content. But the moment you redirect that energy back to your own needs, goals, or healing, their tone changes. What you'll find is that someone who's using you doesn't want to share your attention with you. They want all of it for themselves. It often starts with small remarks that sound innocent on the surface. When you say you need time alone, they respond with, "Oh, I guess I'm not important anymore." When you set a boundary around your availability, they mutter, "You've changed." When you spend more time focusing on your career, your mental health, or even your rest, they frame it as abandonment. "You're just leaving me behind. You're selfish now," or "You only care about yourself." These statements are not about love, they're about control. The moment you step out of the role they've assigned you, giver, caretaker, problem solver, they feel threatened. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because they're losing their free access to your energy. In their mind, they see your growth, your boundaries, your independence as personal attacks because they can't benefit from them. This guilt tripping can be incredibly manipulative because it plays on your empathy. If you're a kind, compassionate person, you don't want to hurt anyone. So when someone suggests you're being cold or neglectful, it strikes a nerve. You start second-guessing your actions. You ask yourself, am I being selfish? Am I really turning my back on them? And just like that, you're pulled back into the role they want you in, overextending yourself to make sure they feel secure while your own needs go unmet. They'll disguise their discomfort as emotional honesty. "I just miss how close we were," or "It hurts that you're pulling away." But if you look closely, you'll see that their words are rarely followed by a desire to support you. They don't ask how you're doing or what you need. Their concern is not your well-being. It's the fact that they are no longer the center of your world. What's especially toxic is that they expect you to applaud them for any small step of support they offer, but they criticize or punish you for taking time to pour into yourself. They might disappear, become distant, or lash out. They'll start withholding affection or validation, anything to make you question your right to prioritize your own life. This is emotional conditioning. They are teaching you that focusing on yourself equals conflict, that self-care comes at the cost of connection. So you begin to shrink again, minimizing your needs, pushing aside your goals, delaying your dreams just to avoid the guilt, just to keep them close. But in reality, the moment someone makes you feel bad for growing, they've already stopped being someone who supports you. they've become someone who uses you. People who truly care about you will encourage your self-focus. They will cheer for your boundaries, your healing, your personal evolution. They'll understand that your attention to yourself doesn't take away from your love for them. It strengthens it. It clings it. But someone who only values you for what you can do for them will interpret your self-care as a threat to their comfort. And so, every time you try to rise, they try to pull you back. Not always with force, often with guilt, often with silence, often with emotional distance disguised as pain. They want you to believe that in choosing you, doing something wrong. But all you're really doing is finally stepping out of a one-sided dynamic and beginning to reclaim your identity, your energy, and your worth. This guilt they project onto you is not accidental, it's calculated. It's a manipulation wrapped in emotion, designed to make you question your rights to care for yourself. And the more you grow, the more uncomfortable they become. Not because your growth is harmful, but because it exposes how little they were actually contributing to your life in the first place. As you begin to set healthier habits, spending time with yourself, investing in your goals, focusing on your healing, they start to feel their influence slipping away. You're no longer bending over backward to make sure they're okay. You're no longer the same version of yourself they once exploited, emotionally available 24/7, sacrificing sleep, time, and peace just to keep them satisfied. And so they retaliate, not always loudly, but strategically. They may withdraw emotionally to punish you. Suddenly, they're not as affectionate or present. They become moody, passive-aggressive, or distant. It's their way of saying, if I can't have all of you, then I'll give you less of me. But this is not healthy compromise. It's emotional blackmail. They're trying to force you into choosing your needs or their approval. Sometimes they'll go further, turning others against you. They may paint you as the villain to friends or family. They've changed. They've become cold. They don't care about anyone but themselves now. They twist the truth to create a narrative where they are the victim of your independence. This isolates you and forces you to defend your growth instead of celebrating it. And often you don't even realize this is happening until you feel complete torn. You want to grow, but every step forward feels like betrayal. You start apologizing for doing things that are healthy. You start hiding your progress, your peace, your goals, your joy, because you're afraid it'll make them feel left behind. You make yourself smaller again, not because it feels right, but because guilt has convinced you that putting yourself first is wrong. But ask yourself this: why does someone who claims to love or care about you need you to stay broken, to feel close to you? Why do they only feel connected to you when you're tired, stressed, and emotionally available for their problems, but never your own? Because someone who uses you doesn't want you empowered. They want you dependent on them, on their moods, on their approval. The moment you detach from that emotional grip, they panic. Not because they're losing love, but because they're losing control over the version of you that was easiest to manipulate. Real love doesn't demand that you sacrifice your well-being. Real friends, real partners, real supporters, they celebrate your glow up. They are happy when you finally take a day off. They're proud when you start therapy, chase your goals, get that job, say a no, or simply rest. They don't need you to be in pieces just so they can feel whole. But someone who is using you will always try to reframe your healing as harm to them. They make your growth seem like abandonment. Your boundaries seem like betrayal. Your independence seem like rejection. They can't stand the idea of you being happy without them because their connection to you was never about love. It was about control. They didn't want a relationship with you. They wanted a role to be played, one that constantly fed them attention, support, validation, or care. And the moment you stepped out of that role and chose to start writing your own story, they decided to punish you not because you hurt them, but because you stopped letting them use you as a tool to avoid their own growth. One of the most telling and deeply felt signs that someone is using you is not always what they say or do. It's how you feel after being around them. If after nearly every interaction, you feel drained, uneasy, heavy, or just tired in your soul. It's not your imagination. That emotional exhaustion is your body and spirit sending a message your mind may not want to accept. This person is not good for you. Emotional exhaustion isn't just about having a tough conversation or going through a difficult phase. It's a recurring feeling of being mentally, emotionally, and even physically depleted every time you engage with them. It's feeling like you're walking on eggshells, giving more than you have, constantly anticipating their needs, and never being met with the same level of care or concern in return. You may enter the conversation with hope or openness, ready to listen, help, or support, but you leave it feeling used, unappreciated, or somehow blamed for something you didn't even do. You might notice that every talk revolves around them, their problems, their emotions, their life. And when it's finally your turn to speak, they rush, minimize, or redirect the attention. You give them the space to cry, vent, rage, or process. But when you open up, you're met with silence, apathy, or dismissal. That imbalance creates a subtle internal burnout that grows heavier with every interaction. And it doesn't always happen loudly. Users aren't always rude or aggressive. In fact, some of the most exhausting people are those who disguise their taking as neediness or helplessness. They make it feel like you're abandoning them if you don't carry their emotional baggage for them. You become the emotional caretaker, the listener, the fixer, the therapist, and over time, that role becomes a burden you never agreed to carry. Worse, you start feeling guilty for even noticing this exhaustion. You convince yourself that being tired is normal, that you're just being sensitive, that maybe they really do need you. But the truth is, they've trained you to accept depletion as love, to see exhaustion as the cost of connection. And that is not healthy. It's a trap. Sometimes the exhaustion doesn't even make sense logically. You can't always pinpoint why you feel so low afterward. That's because emotional drain isn't always about conflict. It's about imbalance. When the emotional scales are tipped too far in their favor for too long, your spirit starts to collapse under the weight of the unspoken pressure. You become their source of comfort, but they never become yours. You start to feel invisible in a relationship where you are constantly present. It also becomes a cycle. You anticipate their calls or messages with dread, not joy. You feel obligated to respond, not because you want to, but because you have to. And then, once the interaction is over, you spend hours replaying what was said, questioning yourself, and trying to recover from the mental drain. That's not friendship. That's not love. That's emotional labor without emotional safety. What's worse is that users often take advantage of your exhaustion to deepen their grip. They wait until you're too tired to set boundaries, too emotionally afraid to say no. And that's when they ask for more time, more attention, more of you. They know that when you're worn down, you're more likely to give in. They don't offer rest, they exploit your weariness. Eventually, you might find yourself withdrawing from other relationships, goals, or passions, not because you want to, but because you don't have anything left to give. You feel tapped out, disconnected, numb. That's the cost of being around someone who is constantly feeding off your energy without ever feeding your soul in return. That kind of relationship doesn't just waste your time. It erodes your spirit, your joy, your clarity, your confidence. The exhaustion becomes your new normal, and that's when it becomes most dangerous, when you stop realizing how drained you are because you've gotten used to the emptiness. But your energy is sacred, your peace is priceless, and the people who deserve your presence are the ones who leave you feeling lighter, not heavier, filled, not emptied, steady, not shaken. You face it. You don't sugarcoat it, excuse it, or hope it changes. You confront the truth, not because it's easy, but because your peace depends on it. You stop explaining your boundaries and you start enforcing them. You stop shrinking yourself to keep others comfortable, and you begin reclaiming the energy that was never appreciated in the first place. You must understand this. Being kind does not mean being a doormat. Being loving does not mean being used. And being loyal does not mean staying where you are not respected, valued, or supported. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cold for walking away from people who only showed up to take. Protecting your energy is not cruelty, it's maturity. It's wisdom earned through experienced pain and through learning the hard way that love without reciprocity is not love at all. So if someone makes you feel guilty for growing, confused for setting boundaries, or exhausted every time they come around, don't ignore those signs. You are not here to be used. You are here to be loved, to be respected, and to be whole. Choose the people who choose you, not just when they need you, but when you need them. Not just when you're easy to be around, but even when you're tired, messy, or healing. Because real connection doesn't drain you. It restores you, and you deserve nothing less than that.